Hello, Beecher community. Thanks to those who were able to make it out to the open house last night. I thought I'd put together, as promised, we put together this video, walk you through the slides that I showed for the referendum and provide you an explanation. And then as we do round two, we'll have a second open house to discuss some more things and revolve around the importance of that referendum. So first, I want to thank these people who have been part of the first round of referendum information. They've watched this presentation numerous times, and a few of them were even there last night to kind of show their support. So I appreciate everybody who's on this list and all the help they've been able to provide. So the goals, as I said last night, is to explain, what the situation is, why being in a PTELL district affects us so much, the history of the levy, how the referendum is going to affect you as a taxpayer, the things that we actually are doing currently or have done in the last few years to improve the lives of our students, and then listen to questions, which we did at that night to address the next open house, and there was some great conversation at the end. So a PTELL district, going back to what we talked about in December with levies, a PTELL district is a district that is limited within what they can do. It's called the Property Tax Extension Limitation Law. And so what happens is if you are a district like Beecher, your increase in revenue or your levy, if you will, is limited by a formula provided by the state, and it revolves around CPI, the Consumer Price Index. So back in November when I started the work on this, and the December when it was approved, the CPI was 1.4%. And so in a tax cap district, you could, even though we have a truth in taxation hearing that can, anything over 5%, CPI is 1.4%. So it's one of those things that unless CPI just balloons, you're never going to have to worry about that truth in taxation. However, let's say hypothetically the district said, you know what, we want to do a 10% increase. We're going to ask for 10% more. Wouldn't be allowed unless you go through the referendum process. Because, like I said, the Will County Clerk's Office and the state will say, nope, you're a tax cap district. You're unable to do that. You can only go up by this percentage via the formula. And a friendly reminder that this referendum, this levy that we're talking about, does not affect this tax year. It's going to be next year's tax year. So this would be the levy for the December of 2022 and then the tax year of 2023. Some of the words that I'm going to continue to use: levy. Levy is the rate that you're taxed at for your property. Your EAV is your estimated assessed value. So layman's term is the value of your home, your property, things like that. Limiting rate. So the state will tell you, or the county will say, you can only charge or you can only gather this much of that per 100,000. So if you remember, the levy in anticipated levy that we did in December was 489. And the year before that was 507. So that's the rate that they're going to pull for taxes for the school. And then extension is the bond payment. So when we talk about extensions, we talk about the money that is also set aside from those taxes. I'm sorry, not set aside, pulled during those taxes to go to the bond payment, which is used to pay off the junior high. And just a friendly reminder that this is the last year for that bond payment. So after this year, after this tax cycle, you no longer have that bond payment. So the question, everybody wants to know is, if I vote yes, will my taxes go up next year? And as I discussed last night, it's a semi-loaded question because I can't tell you that because I don't know the EAV next year. I don't know all those additional things. But what I can tell you for certainty, that the overall tax rate that you will be paying next year will be lower than any year since 2011. So if you go to your clerk's office and you pull the tax information for school districts and you find Beecher, you have to go all the way back to 2011 to find an overall tax rate lower than the 575, which is what we talked about last night. So in 2012, I believe that went to 577. And since then, the town of Beecher has paid over $5.75 on your rate overall. And I'll show you that in the next few slides. So remember, your tax levy right now, the one that we just did was anticipated, and anything you've done prior to that included your limiting rate and a bond payment. So last year in 2020, it was a 506.58 limiting rate, and then another 121 on the bond payment. So you put those together, you get your total rate. So your actual rate in 2020 was 635, that magic number right there. That includes the bond payment. So the referendum that we're looking for, which is addressing limiting rate, will ask for 575 without an extension. There is no additional cost on top of that limiting rate, unlike you've seen in the last decade in terms of bond payments. So what am I talking about? So here's a little chart. I just went back to 2016. I can keep going back even further than this. And one of our community members suggested that I show a chart with a few more years prior, which I'll gladly do. So when I talk about limiting rate, this is the limiting rate that I'm referring to. This right here is the actual money that is pulled from your taxes per $100,000 of your AV that goes right back to the school system to spend the year of. So if I have a job, this is my weekly paycheck. This is the money that goes to my weekly paycheck that I can do normal things with. The extension, this is the payment that goes to your bond. So this is like your mortgage. So every part of my overall salary, I got to send to my mortgage statement. So in all actuality, this is how much I'm spending every year on my taxes, because that is what's getting pulled. 573 of that is going to back into the school for operations, and then 125 of that is going to the extension, the bond payment. And you'll see this anticipated 149 and 121, and then next year there is no bond payment, so that is gone. So when I talk about are my taxes going down? Well, when I say that is, if you look at your total rate will will be lower, yes. And as a matter of fact, your rate would go down by 5.7% if the anticipated 610 is correct. And the number I have to use is the last verified levy that was approved by Will County, which is 2020. And that was 635 for Beecher, a 507 limited rate, 129 extension. That 635 actually dropped to 575, which is almost a 10% drop in the rate. Again, when we talk about this rate. And then this is the actual revenue brought in by the school district from the limiting rate. This does not include the bond payment. So just so everybody knows where those come from. So in 2020, this is actually where Beecher fell in terms of all these other schools when it came to limiting rate. It's 506.58. If you saw a 507, it's simply because I rounded. So it's 506.58. But just a friendly reminder that nobody at the time paid that amount. So what did you really pay? Well, if we put it in there, and this includes the other school districts as well. I'm sorry, my mouse stopped working. There we go. I'm sorry. If we put that 575 in there, we actually look at all the other school districts. They've been adjusted because everybody has a bond payment of some form. And so once again, we still fall right there in the middle. Somebody might ask, why is there a W? Why is there 114, 161? These are high school districts, and these are the elementary districts attached to them. So Crete and Manteno are the unit districts that, just like Beecher, Momence, Grand Park, and Piatone. Piatone I'll make a reference to multiple times. They do a working cash bond. Their referendum did not pass for the limiting rate, so they passed a working cash bond. So they still have to pay a bond payment, but some of that goes off to interest on those bond payments. So I want everybody to be aware of that. Second one is, why was money not an issue before, and now you're facing a referendum? And I mentioned this last night as well. Everybody could point out, hey, 4 years ago, Beecher had $15 million in the bank. You didn't have a problem, and now suddenly you have a problem. So what's going on? Well, there's two significant pieces to that. The first is probably the most important one, and you'll see that over the next few, or by the end of the slides, is we decided to actually make a commitment back into putting money into schools and the kids, and actually spending that money that's just been sitting in the bank. So that's a significant piece. But again, that's a small part of it. The other part of it is the fact that it's really difficult to continue to keep up with expenditures when your CPI is 1.4%. Now, inflation is 7.4%. Somebody brought it up last night. Well, 7.4% isn't everything. Most of it's your teacher salaries. Well, I agree. So let's even say a teacher salary is at 2%. Well, if CPI is 1.4%, even that, and 2% is a very minuscule raise, even that doesn't keep up with the expenditures. So it's just a fact of life that sooner or later, if your revenue only goes up by 1.4% and anything else you can tell me goes up by 2%, it becomes very difficult. And sooner or later, those expenditures will outrun the revenue, which is why we're in the position we are now. So I also wanted to kind of show you, this is the local revenue from the limiting rate back from 2016. So you'll notice actually our limiting rate brought in less money in 2017. There was a nice little uptick, and then it stayed stagnant. And now, that we have been able to recover some of that. Even though it looks like a huge jump, this is really only $200,000. And I say only. I know $200,000 is a lot to some things, but when your budget is $16 million, $200,000, it doesn't seem as much, but at least it's a little bit of an uptick. And then here's your overall. This includes federal and state funding. So orange line is your revenue, and then gray line is your expenditures. And again, it continues to go up. You're not going to see expenditures go down. Now, what we've talked about is this is where that revenue line last time went down a little bit. And so we lost some more revenue there. And it's just, you'll see CPI doesn't allow it to really go up a whole lot. And as much as I want to be able to say, oh, it's great, it's that's part of the problem in terms of expenditures. You'll see that actually has a much steeper trajectory. The big thing with this is that abatement and some of the other big expenses that have come in. And as I said last night, my goal is not to take this orange line and just put it up here, because that would not be fair to our community, and that would be me doing a poor job. What I want to do is take this orange line and bring it up here, and then my job is to take this gray line back under here. And so that's our goal, is to kind of meet in the middle, have that orange line just like over here, get back above that gray line, and then obviously I do financial create a financial understanding with the board, and we make sure that we spend what we have and keep moving forward in positive ways. Pulled some other area schools just to kind of see where we stand with everybody else. You'll notice blue is local revenue, orange is state revenue, and gray is your federal revenue. And then some schools you'll see get a lot of the revenue from locals, us, PTELL, Lincoln Way, and others get a lot from state or federal. So that's kind of giving you an idea where we stand. This is percentage, by the way, not total amount of money. Obviously, Lincoln Way has a lot more money than we do. But what you'll also notice is that most of the schools on the right-hand side here spend their money the same way. So even though Lincoln Way has a far and above much larger budget than, let's go to the other extreme, Grant Park. Grant Park is a very small budget. They actually pretty much spend their money the same way. So, and obviously look at Beecher. Beecher is the same way. Now, why is this orange a little bit bigger? O&M is your operations and maintenance. So this is a little bit bigger because of all the projects that we've tried to get done over the last few years. So that's why that's a little bit bigger than some of these others. When it comes to our revenue expenditure comparison, here's some of the surrounding schools. Again, orange is your expenditures, revenue is blue. So if blue is low, that means you're running a deficit. And you'll see the only one in here the only two in here are Manteno and Grant Park. Manteno has a significant bond that helps that out with. PTELL, as I said, sells working cash bonds, and they still have that shortage. And then Beecher, this is kind of where we're at. This is 2020, by the way. This is that deficit. And again, my goal is to take expenditures and bring it to here, revenue, bring it there, and so we're a nice a little bit flatter. So my job is to make this number go down. And I'm telling people that is the plan. The plan is not to have revenue shoot up a lot and we continue to spend money willy-nilly, which is a great phrase. And then lastly, here's another chart just kind of giving you an idea of the actual dollar amount we spend versus the other community area schools. And we're in line with what a lot of them are doing, especially when it comes to our school size. Here's BBCHS, Manteno, Grant Park, PTELL, and Beecher. And again, ours is a little bit bigger here because of those projects. This would be going probably back down to about here moving forward. So going to your referendum numbers. So when you get to the ballot box in June, what they do is they have to portray it in terms of the limiting rate that you saw back in 2020. Again, the last levy that was approved by Will County, not the anticipated one that was approved that the board approved. So that number, if you go on the top portion, it was 506.58. The EAV that given year was 172 million. So the revenue brought in by the school district specifically from the limiting rate for operating costs was $8.7 million. In 2022, if we take that number to go to 575, we're going to do a comparison. EAV is still the same. The revenue, you'll see, goes actually up by $1.18 million. And with those numbers, you would pay an extra $228 a year per 100,000 on your home, 19 per month, and then 62 cents per day. But as I said last night, I want to stress to everybody here, you did not pay 506.58 on 2020. You did not, because there was also a bond payment. So this will not include a bond payment. The bond is done. This did. So in 2020, you actually paid $635.28. So I want to make sure that everybody knows. So I'm going to use my limiting rate without the bond payment, still using that $635. EAV is still the same. Now, the total revenue here was 10.9 because some of that money went straight to the bond payment. However, this number is still the same, 9.9. And all of this goes directly back to the school for operating costs, operating expenses. That's actually a 60-cent drop from what you saw in 2020. The revenue is still $1.1 million more. Sorry, we have a tornado alarm. I'm going to pause and hopefully get back to it. I apologize. Sorry, everybody. If you live in Beecher and you happen to be around, it's 10 o'clock and the the tornado alarm went off. So that's why we had to take that little pause. So I apologize for that. So back to this. So again, if you remember me saying $1.18 million would be extra into our revenue. And that's because compared to that number, this again also included the bond. But in reality, you paid that per 100,000 on your EAV. Well, you would actually be paying $200 less per year, $16.75 less a month, and 55 cents less per day per 100,000 on your home compared to that rate in 2020. So that's why that question of will my taxes go down is very difficult to answer. But I can tell you your limiting rate would have pulled less than what you actually paid in 2020. So in terms of just a day-to-day, what does this mean? Well, let's go with your home. Let's say your house has an EAV of 200,000. Again, these are very general terms, and I apologize. This is your assessed value. Let's say your house assessed value was 200,000. So you're being taxed on $200,000. So in 2020, if your assessment was $200,000, you paid $635 rate. That means your taxes for the Beecher School District was $4,233.33. And of that, only $3,380 came to the school. So this was that limiting rate. So this is what your total rate was, and this is how much of the limiting rate came to the school. So if we instead say, well, let's look at 575. Well, 575 in 2020 on a house that has that $200,000 value would actually ask you to pay $3,833. And every dime of that goes straight back into the operating fund of the school. Nothing goes to the bond payment. And so when you ask, are my taxes going to be different? Well, the answer is obviously yes. If you look at your overall tax rate, you're actually paying around $400 less at 575 than you did at the 635. And you'll notice that the school district, you're actually giving them $500 more, and that's because the limiting rate is different. So this number right here is what would be spent, that'd be taxed for the school district if the number was 575 and your house was worth 200,000. Again, if you know the EAV of your home, you simply take that number, and in Will County, you divide it by 3, so 200,000 divided by 3, and then you multiply it by this percent, so 6.35, and then percentage divided by 100, you'll find out exactly how much your tax rate would be. I also have one of my committee members who's going to provide me a tax bill from 2020, and I can actually show you on your tax bill what it would look like for the next open house. Where have we already cut back? So O&M, again, that's the operation and maintenance. Purchase services is a huge one right now, and that's what we use to make sure our boilers continue to run, our pipes work, things like that. Well, with a new HVAC system that was just purchased and going to be installed this summer, most of that money is going to be saved. So that's $200,000 right there. We will not be in the budget for next year. Abatement costs, we're going to be finished with this year. So that's another $300,000 that's not going to be in the budget moving forward. Transportation, I've already worked with the board to get the buses on a rotational basis, saving us about $90,000 to $100,000 a year. Technology purposes, I've already worked with Mr. Duncan looking at what we really need to buy from year to year as opposed to just buying to buy. We can save $80,000 a year on that alone. And we actually found a digital equity grant for $73,000 that I'll talk about a little bit later. That will save us a little bit more money. And then the other thing is that ESSER money. Everybody knows that school districts across the world, Illinois, got ESSER money. And so what we did is when I looked at the ESSER funds and ESSER money usage, I put it into current staffing needs. Instead of hiring additional staff or doing extra things that we would have to maintain in the future once ESSER money was no longer a thing. But instead, what we're doing is using it to cover our current costs, our current activities, our current programs. And that way, when ESSER is gone, it's already built into our budget that it's one of the things we're already doing anyway. So it saved us money in the long run. And that's also aligned with the survey that I sent out to everybody a while back about what do you think still needs to be improved, and everybody overwhelmingly said continue to update our buildings, which is true, and then our opportunities for kids, which I would agree with, and then where would you cut the money? Well, once again, here's your transportation, which I told you we just worked on a rotational basis, and then here is your technology purchase, which I mentioned we already are cutting back, and we're looking at additional ways to cut back as well. So keep moving forward with that. And I will notice that the one thing that everybody voted last on was staff and class sizes. So I'm glad to see that the first thought is let's just cut teachers, and I'm happy about that because I definitely don't want to do that as well. So I'm going to take a few minutes here, kind of go through the projects. This is just within the last 3 years. So if you want to go to the start of Brad Cox's tenure here through January when I've been here. So these are the things that we've done. By we, I mean the board of education. I know I'm not part of the board, but I report to them. So here are the things that have been brought before the board and have been approved. So hopefully, if you want, you can pause on this screen so you can kind of see where those are coming from. And then there's actually 2 pages of it. And you'll see the big ones right here. This is now over $1 million because we do have to put the tile back in. So this does include the abatement at the elementary. We now have to replace the tile that would be removed. So that's going to put that over a little over $1 million. HVAC system, $5.8 million. This came out of reserves again. This is not part of the operating yearly cost. So this is, if you put a HVAC system in your own home, you probably ended up pulling it out of your savings account. We did the same thing here. So bus fleet updated, spent $600,000 getting that back up. So hopefully you saw that. That total is around $10.6 million spent in the last 3.5 years. So going back to that question number 2, why did we have $15 million eons ago, and now you're saying we don't have any money? Well, we have money. And again, this 10.6, most of it has come out of reserves because that's what the 15 point whatever it was sitting in reserve as a savings account that we decided to start putting money back into kids and opportunities back into kids. And so $10.6 million on infrastructure in 3.5 years is significant, and that's doing nothing but making things better for kids. Things that we still could be addressing. These are just some ideas that were brought by the committee. And as we move forward, I hope to hear more things from the community about what we can address. The AC, I was asked about it again last night. I talked to GRP. The equipment just isn't available. The high school and elementary, we were able to order that in time. But by the time we got to the junior high and be able to talk about that conversation, the equipment that they're looking for wouldn't be available. So this would be a project. If we wanted to do it, and the referendum was able to be passed, we could look to address the following summer of 23. More importantly, here's really what we've done since 2018 in terms of staffing. Buildings are great; they keep kids safe. Roofs are great, driveways are great, but this is actually staffing. This is what your kids see every single day. And these are the things that we've added, the positions we've added in 3.5 years. And that's totaled about $900,000. So again, when the question comes, where's this revenue? Why are these expenditures so crazy? What's up with the revenue? Well, it's because we're providing learning opportunities and things for kids. And so this is huge. $900,000 a year more in salaries in 3 years to get us where we need to be is significant. And that's just going off of last year's numbers. We still have things that we need to address. This top one will be addressed this year because our Hispanic population continues to grow. We want to make sure that we can provide the services that they need. And so we will be hiring an ELL teacher this year and then looking to address some other things. And once again, these are things that just we've said still could be addressed at the school. And I know that the community has a lot more ideas of what could be done. So what happens if the referendum does not pass? That's a great question. The first thing would be that we would kind of go the Peatone route. And if the referendum for a limited rate doesn't work, we then say, hey, are we able to sell working cash bonds as needed to make up the difference? And then we can have a balanced budget. I said, or, if those things don't work, there's other ways. And so obviously, if you're trying to make $1 million up somewhere, you have to look at where you can cut within the budget. And $1 million is not very easy to cut by just cutting the buses here or there, or some technology purchases here or there. So you'd have to address it in terms of personnel and opportunities, which is the last thing I definitely want to do. And it should be, and I know last night the people also said the same thing. This is where we don't want to look at cutting, because we're finally getting to a place where our opportunities for kids is getting where it needs to be again. What grants have been applied for? I've mentioned a lot of these things throughout this presentation. $50,000 for the elementary bathroom, we got covered. We reinvested $1.1 million of the ESSER 3 and then reallocated $165 of the ESSER 2. So we actually already got the $165 back. There's that digital equity grant we talked about, the free lunch program. That as long as the state provides an opportunity, we'll continue to do that. If they drop that program, obviously we'll go back to paid lunch. And then this is the one that Mr. Duncan talked about when he presented, I want to say in November or December. There's a fiber optic cable that runs from the high school to the junior high that currently we lease, I believe, from AT&T. It's around $2,000 a month. Mr. Duncan has found some grants that will cover the entire cost of burying our own cable. That would be finished by by next summer. So not 22, but 23. And then that alone is going to save us $2,000 in technology per month, having our own fiber optic cable. Oops. So I want to kind of finish on this note. Remember, if you vote yes, your overall tax rate will still be lower than any year it has been since 2011 when you include the bond. And again, that 2011 levy rate was $561.94. And then 2012, it went above that 575 marker that I've been mentioning. And then the most important thing I want to remind everybody is there's no bond payment. So when you look at your tax bill, the rate you see, 100% of that's going to go to schools. So as I said this last night, I had Mr. Duncan create a referendum email. So if you if you watch this and you said, hey, I have a question about this, or hey, have you thought about that, or hey, at the next open house, could you address this? Send it to that email. It'll go to me, and I'll look over it, and hopefully I'll be able to implement it into the next open house, answer those questions as we move forward. We're looking into late March, so we're probably going to have an open house at the end of every month going into this. So just want to give you a heads up, and I want to thank you for your time. Take care. Have a great day.